In an age of glowing screens, restless nights, and constant pressure, there was once a civilization forged in the icy north where people didn't just survive. They slept deeper than anyone in human history. No sleeping pills, no sleep trackers, no hacks, just a life lived in harmony with nature's rhythm. The Vikings, known for war and conquest, may have held the greatest secret to true restorative sleep, and today you're about to uncover it. Imagine this. The sky over Scandinavia has faded into deep indigo. A Viking longhouse stands in silence, its timber walls holding in the warmth of the central hearth. The wind howls outside, brushing snow across the roof. Inside, the fire crackles softly, casting golden light on sleeping faces. But not everyone is asleep, because in the Viking world, midnight wasn't always a time to sleep. It was a time between a moment suspended in stillness when dreams paused and life returned briefly before the second descent into rest. You see, the Vikings didn't sleep the way we do. Modern society has drilled into us the belief that 8 straight hours is the gold standard. But historically, biologically, that's not how human sleep evolved. And the Vikings, they lived this truth naturally. What they practiced, without knowing the term, was biphasic sleep, a segmented sleep cycle that aligns closely with our body's natural rhythms. Two distinct periods of sleep, separated by a quiet waking phase in the middle of the night. In the Viking longhouse, the family might retire shortly after sunset, around 7 or 8 p.m. during the long winter months. They'd fall into their first sleep, a deep, undisturbed phase lasting about 4 hours, and then they would wake. Not in panic, not from insomnia, but gently, naturally, as if their bodies knew this was part of the process. This watching hour was embraced, not feared. During this time, they might tend to the fire, check on the animals, sip a warm drink, share quiet conversations, reflect, meditate, even pray. Then, after about an hour or two, they'd lie back down for their second sleep, drifting into slumber until the first signs of dawn crept across the snowy hills. Modern science has a name for this midnight intermission. It's called the prolactin phase, a biologically calm, contented state. In this window, the human body naturally produces a surge of prolactin, a hormone associated with relaxation, peace, and mental clarity. And while we stare at ceiling fans at 3 a.m., cursing our restlessness, the Vikings used that same moment as a gift. In fact, references to biphasic sleep are hidden in the language of their time. Old Norse sagas speak of Fyrsta Svefn, the first sleep, and Öðrum Svefni, the second. In Grettis saga, the hero is described waking from his first sleep to do chores before returning to bed. In Eagle's saga, conversations and decisions happen in the dark hours between sleeps, not as interruptions, but as part of life. And it wasn't just the Vikings. Across medieval Europe, segmented sleep was common. It wasn't until the Industrial Revolution, with its factory shifts, gas lamps, and strict clocks, that humanity began forcing itself into one long block of sleep. The 8-hour rule is modern, artificial, a product of productivity culture, not biology. But in the Viking world, where time flowed with the sun and moon, not alarm clocks, sleep was allowed to breathe. The long winters of Scandinavia, with their 16 to 20 hours of darkness, would have made a single extended sleep impractical, even unnatural. Breaking the night into two halves gave structure to the void, and the waking hour offered something we're starved of today: a pause, a moment of calm, a place where the mind could settle or wander. Imagine Astrid, a healer, sitting by the fire at midnight, mixing herbs for the next day's remedies, or Thorvald, a shipbuilder, whispering plans to his sons for the boat they'd shape from ancient pine come spring. The longhouse isn't silent, it breathes. With every crackle of flame, every shared word in the dark, this rhythm becomes not just sleep, but life itself. Today, we call midnight awakenings a problem. We Google cures for waking up at 3 a.m. We take pills, scroll phones, stress ourselves back into wakefulness. But what if, like the Vikings, we saw it not as a failure, but a rhythm? What if we welcomed the pause, gave it space, and let it guide us gently back to rest? Modern sleep scientists like historian A. Roger Kirch have studied hundreds of historical references to biphasic sleep, and they've concluded this was once the norm, not the exception, a natural state of human rest, disrupted only in recent centuries. In one study, when participants were removed from artificial lighting and allowed to follow natural light cycles, they automatically shifted into segmented sleep within days. Melatonin levels increased, stress decreased, sleep improved. So perhaps the Vikings weren't behind the times. Perhaps they were ahead, by accident, by necessity, but also by design. The design of nature, not industry. As we continue to struggle with restless nights and shallow sleep, the Viking way offers a quiet reminder. Maybe we don't need to fix sleep. Maybe we need to return to it, not as a performance, not as a battle, but as a rhythm, as natural as the fire fading and the stars moving overhead. Picture a Viking longhouse deep in the Scandinavian winter. Outside, the world is frozen, blanketed in white silence. The sun has vanished early, dipping behind snow-capped peaks long before dinner, and now the only light comes from the hearth, a soft amber flicker that dances on wooden beams and sleeping faces. This was Viking darkness, and it was unlike anything we experience today. In our modern world, true darkness is nearly extinct. Even when we turn off the lights, blue glowing screens and blinking LEDs pierce the night. Our cities never sleep, and neither, it seems, do we. But the Vikings, they lived in sync with the dark, not by choice, but by design. A design that just might have given them one of the most powerful sleep environments in human history. Their homes, longhouses made of timber, turf, and earth, were built low to the ground, insulated against wind and cold. Windows, if they existed at all, were tiny, covered with animal hide, oiled cloth, or shutters. When night fell, those walls held in not just warmth, but shadow, real darkness, complete darkness, the kind that modern sleep scientists say is essential for deep, restorative rest, the kind that tells your brain it's time to release melatonin, time to let go. And that's exactly what happened. Without artificial light disrupting their rhythms, Viking bodies fell naturally into the hormonal flow of night. Melatonin surged as the sky dimmed. Sleep followed not by force, but by alignment. Compare that to today. Even a small dose of blue light, the kind emitted from phones, tablets, or LED bulbs, can delay melatonin production by hours. That one last scroll on Instagram, it's not just bad for your brain, it's stealing your sleep. The Vikings, of course, didn't have this problem. Their only sources of light after sundown were firelight, oil lamps, or beeswax candles, all warm spectrum red-toned, gentle, dim, non-invasive. The exact kind of light modern research now recommends in the evening hours. In reconstructed Viking homes, experiments showed these light sources barely reached 20 lumens, a faint glow compared to the harsh 1,000-plus lumens of our standard bulbs. Their fires were often banked low at night, just enough to keep warm, not enough to blind. And their candles, rare, expensive, and used sparingly. In essence, their nights weren't just dark, they were designed for darkness. This total absence of light didn't only help with melatonin, it also impacted body temperature regulation, visual stillness, and mental clarity, all known factors in sleep depth. Consider Leif, a fisherman on the Norwegian coast. His home sits near the sea, the nights long and cold. After finishing his evening meal, he'd retreat to the raised sleeping platform beside the hearth, the only light a few coals glowing beneath iron. As the heat slowly fades, the dark takes over. Thick, enveloping, and silent. His pineal gland responds exactly as nature intended. Melatonin floods his system, and Leif drifts into a deep, uninterrupted sleep. Today, sleep scientists try to recreate that same depth. We use blackout curtains, melatonin pills, blue light glasses, sleep masks, all to chase the natural conditions the Vikings had by default. And here's the irony: what we call sleep hygiene, a modern concept, was simply life for the Norse. The architecture of their homes reinforced this. In winter, smaller dwellings meant less fuel was needed, but they also created more intimate, more insulated, and much darker sleeping quarters. Some homes even had sun-blocking wool curtains or turf-insulated chambers built into the thickest parts of the wall, especially for summer, when the midnight sun could flood the sky for hours. Yes, even in the bright northern summers, the Vikings knew the value of darkness. They found ways to recreate it, protect it, and preserve it, not because of science, but because of instinct. There are even references in sagas and poems like the Havamal to the value of quiet, of rest, of not worrying through the night. One verse reads, "The unwise man lies awake all night, thinking of many things. When morning comes, he is weary still." The Vikings didn't need sleep studies to tell them that overthinking in the light ruins rest. They embraced the dark as sacred, necessary, and non-negotiable. And what about sleep quality? The combination of complete darkness, natural light exposure during the day, physical exhaustion, and communal warmth created what researchers now call the perfect storm for human rest. REM cycles deepened, slow wave sleep flourished. Their bodies not only slept, they healed. Today, we buy $2,000 mattresses to fix what light pollution and digital noise have broken. But maybe it's not about buying more. Maybe it's about subtracting noise, subtracting brightness, subtracting the artificial clutter that's crept into our nights. The Vikings' sleep environment wasn't luxurious, but it was aligned with the earth, the sky, the fire, and most importantly, with the human body. So when we talk about the secrets of great sleep, we might not need to look forward. We may need to look back to a world where darkness wasn't feared. It was welcomed where sleep wasn't engineered, it was allowed. It was allowed. The Vikings didn't chase rest. They lived in a way that invited it, and maybe that's the real secret. In the modern world, we're taught that privacy is peace, that the ideal sleep environment is a silent, sealed-off room, alone, undisturbed behind a locked door. But the Vikings saw it differently. To them, sleep was not a solitary act. It was communal. It was shared. And in that sharing, they found something modern science is only now beginning to understand. Safety makes sleep deeper. Step inside a Viking longhouse. The hearth sits at the center, glowing faintly through the night. Along the walls, raised wooden platforms, not beds in the modern sense, but long benches lined with straw, wool, and furs. Here, the entire household would sleep together. Parents, children, grandparents, workers, travelers, all within the same warm space, all within the same breath. In this world, you were never alone in the dark. Today, we associate shared sleep with lack of resources, but in Viking culture, it was by design, not just for warmth, but for protection, for connection, for peace of mind. And modern sleep research confirms what their instincts already knew. When we sleep near trusted others, our nervous system relaxes. The brain's vigilance, that ancient scanning for danger, turns down because someone else is nearby. And that means you can rest just a little deeper. Archaeologists have found the evidence, from Iceland to York, Newfoundland to Roskilde. Viking longhouses featured wide sleeping platforms that ran the length of the building. No private bedrooms, no doors to close, just thick layers of bedding shared among many. Sometimes there were modest status markers. The head of the household, the chieftain and his wife, might sleep closer to the fire, elevated slightly. But the space was still open, communal, alive. This wasn't just a quirk of architecture. It was a reflection of Viking values. Together is safer. Together is stronger. And in sleep, this principle mattered most. Consider this. In our modern age, many people suffer from sleep anxiety. The mind races, the body can't let go. Often, this comes not from noise, but from a subtle feeling of vulnerability. Being alone, exposed, left to carry the night alone. The Vikings? They built a buffer, not just of walls and wood, but of bodies, breath, and shared awareness. If danger came, a thief, a rival, a fire, someone would wake. Not an alarm system, a human system. The sagas tell of attacks foiled because someone stirred during the night, heard a step, sensed a shift in the wind. In Njal's saga, a sleeping household is saved by the faint sound of movement, heard not through tech but through presence. But it wasn't just about safety from the outside. It was about security on the inside. Emotional, psychological, spiritual. Imagine being a child in a Viking household. You fall asleep hearing your parents' breath, your grandmother's steady snoring. You are wrapped not just in furs, but in familiarity, warmth, belonging. And we now know this matters. Modern studies on sleep in infants, children, and even adults show that sleep quality improves when we feel emotionally safe. Co-sleeping in the right context reduces nighttime cortisol, the stress hormone, and improves sleep architecture. The Vikings didn't have words for this, but they felt it. And what about intimacy? Surely, in a room full of people, private moments would be difficult. The sagas and archaeology suggest clever solutions: textile dividers, box beds, curtains, subtle signals, and quiet moments, often during the midnight waking period when not everyone was asleep. Privacy was respected when needed, but connection was prioritized always. It wasn't perfection. It was human. Think about how this changes sleep, not just in theory, but in how it feels. Falling asleep beside your tribe, knowing you are not alone, hearing the quiet rustle of someone adjusting a blanket, the crackle of the fire, the whisper of a story told softly into the dark. These aren't distractions. These are anchors. They tell your body, you're safe now, you can let go. And so you do. There's another layer here: status and structure. Viking society was hierarchical, yes, but not isolating. Even the wealthy often slept within earshot of those who worked for them. They maintained status distinctions, but without severing the bonds of community and interdependence. In winter, when cold gripped the land and the nights stretched endlessly, bodies would huddle closer, shared warmth, shared breath, like animals in a den, but with stories, songs, ritual. Together, they endured the darkness. Together, they dreamed. As Christianity spread and architecture evolved, these arrangements began to change. Walls appeared, rooms divided, sleep became private, status-based. And somewhere along the way, we lost something. We gained silence, but sacrificed security. We gained space, but lost connection. And our sleep, in many ways, became lighter. The Viking model reminds us of a truth that's easy to forget in our hyper-individual age. Sometimes the deepest rest isn't found in isolation, but in the presence of others. In the gentle awareness that you are part of something, watched over, looked after, held even in silence. Maybe the next time you lie awake feeling like you're alone in the dark, remember this. 1,000 years ago, under a turf roof and beside a glowing hearth, someone just like you was falling asleep, surrounded by the heartbeat of their tribe, and in that rhythm, they found peace. Before there were pills for rest, before there were powders, supplements, and sleep smoothies, there was food. Real food. Pulled from the ocean, dug from the soil, fermented in clay pots beside the hearth. The Vikings didn't eat to biohack their sleep. They ate because it was time, it was nourishing, and it was enough. And in doing so, they accidentally created one of the most sleep-friendly diets in human history. Let's begin where every good Viking day did, with movement. They didn't wake up and grab a coffee. They rose with the light, stepped into the cold, and got to work. Rowing, harvesting, butchering, mending sails, turning soil, hours of effort, physical, repetitive grounding, which meant that by the time they ate their first meal, their bodies were ready for it. The main meal came late morning, undorn, as they called it in Old Norse. Hearty, dense, built for stamina. Grains like barley or oats, boiled into thick porridge, salted or smoked fish, hard cheese, pickled vegetables, sometimes meat, always earned. Then, near sundown, after a day of labor under the Nordic sky, came the final meal, Nutford, the night meal, eaten in warmth, eaten in community, and crucially eaten early, usually by 4 or 5 p.m., long before the stars truly settled in. After that, just time. Time to digest, time to slow down, time to sleep. And this small detail, the timing, makes all the difference. Modern sleep science has confirmed what the Vikings did by instinct. Eating too close to bedtime disrupts sleep. It forces your body to work when it should be resting. It confuses the gut, delays melatonin, fragments REM cycles. But leaving a few hours between food and sleep, that's when digestion finishes, blood sugar stabilizes, and the body whispers, now we can rest. Without knowing it, the Viking rhythm of early dinners and long evenings perfectly aligned with the ideal sleep window. But it wasn't just when they ate, it was what they ate. Let's take a closer look. 1. Protein and the power of tryptophan. Viking meals were high in natural protein: fish, lamb, venison, dairy. And with that protein came tryptophan, and an amino acid crucial for producing serotonin and melatonin, the brain's sleep-regulating chemicals. It wasn't lab tested. It was smoked, cured, and seasoned with salt and patience. 2. Omega-3s from the sea. The Norse were a maritime people. Their proximity to the ocean and reliance on it meant fatty fish like salmon, herring, and mackerel were daily staples. These fish are loaded with omega-3 fatty acids, particularly DHA, which modern research has linked to deeper sleep, more REM cycles, and fewer awakenings. For the Vikings, it wasn't a supplement. It was survival. It was dinner. 3. Whole grains and complex carbs. Barley, rye, oats, ground by hand, cooked over fire, eaten with intention. These grains provide complex carbohydrates, not the sugar spike kind, but the slow burn kind, the kind that stabilize blood sugar through the night and support serotonin production. Modern sleep experts call them sleep-supportive carbs. The Vikings just called it bread. 4. Fermented foods. Gut health before it was trendy. Before refrigeration, there was fermentation. Skyr, a thick, tangy dairy product. Fermented fish. Pickled roots and herbs. These foods nourished the gut microbiome. And the gut, as we now know, is deeply tied to the brain's sleep regulation through the gut-brain axis. Some of these foods increased GABA, a neurotransmitter that calms the nervous system and prepares the body for sleep. They weren't chasing microbiome diversity. They were simply preserving the harvest, and in the process, preserving their rest. Number 5, minimal sugar, minimal disruption. The Viking diet was practically void of refined sugar. Honey, when available, was a rare treat, precious and rationed. No late-night sugar crashes, no dessert-driven dopamine rushes before bed, just stable blood sugar and stable sleep. Now let's meet Halfdan, a farmer from the Trondheim region. After a long day tending livestock and repairing fences, he eats a meal of barley porridge with dried berries, smoked trout, and fermented skyr. By the time darkness settles fully over the land, he's by the hearth, wrapped in wool, belly content, but not heavy. He doesn't worry about bloating or indigestion. His body is ready, and when he lies down, sleep comes, like a tide that knows its rhythm. This is the Viking diet, not designed in a lab, not marketed as keto or clean, just whole, seasonal, simple, and aligned with nature. Every element, from timing to content, reinforces what science now confirms. The right food at the right time doesn't just fuel the body, it invites the night. And here's what's most remarkable. The Vikings didn't treat sleep as a problem to solve. They didn't separate it from their way of living. Sleep wasn't hacked, it was earned through effort, rhythm, community, and nourishment. So maybe the key to better sleep isn't in the next supplement, maybe it's on your plate, in your timing, in how you move, and when you stop. The Vikings knew, without ever needing to know, what we eat feeds how we rest, and what we digest during the day determines what we become when we close our eyes. When we think of Vikings, we think of axes, ships, and storms. But that isn't the whole story. Somewhere behind the walls of those longhouses, beyond the clash of steel and the roar of the sea, there was something softer, a different kind of knowledge passed from hand to hand, whispered from mother-daughter, healer to apprentice, a knowledge of plants, of sleep, of stillness. Because the Vikings weren't just warriors, they were herbalists. And when night came, they turned not to pills, but to the earth. Let's meet Astrid. She's a healer, a Lacknir, living in a coastal village near what we now call Roskilde. Outside, the sea growls against the rocks. Winter winds batter the turf walls, but inside the fire glows gently. Astrid stirs a pot over the coals, not food but a tea. Crushed valerian root, a touch of chamomile, a few dried hops. She knows these herbs by scent, by season, by spirit, and she knows this blend brings peace to restless minds and tired bodies. Modern science has since confirmed what Astrid and healers like her already knew. The plants they use contain compounds that calm the nervous system, shorten the time it takes to fall asleep, and increase the depth of sleep itself. Let's step into her world and explore the Viking pharmacopoeia. 1. Valerian root, Valeriana officinalis. Dug from the earth and dried in bundles, valerian was known even then as a powerful sedative. Its roots contain valerianic acid, which binds to the brain's GABA receptors, quieting the nervous system much like modern anti-anxiety drugs, but without the side effects. Vikings would brew it into tea or soak it in warm ale. A bitter taste, but a sweet descent into sleep. 2. Hops, Humulus lupulus. Yes, the same plant used in brewing. But before beer, there was medicine. Hops are a natural relaxant, containing methylbutanol, a compound that acts as a mild sedative. The Vikings didn't just drink them, they burned them, crushed them, stuffed them into herbal pillows for infants and elders alike. Their scent alone was said to soothe the soul. 3. Chamomile, Matricaria chamomilla. Gentle, floral, sacred. Chamomile was steeped for tea and sprinkled onto bedding. Today we know it contains a pigeonin, a flavonoid that promotes sleep by reducing brain activity. But to Astrid, it was simply the flower of calm. Number 4. Linden, Tilia, a tree of peace. Linden blossoms were brewed into calming infusions, used especially for children or the sick. They taste sweet and their scent like summer meadows. They ease tension, reduce anxiety, lower heart rate, a perfect preparation for the long winter night. 5. Lavender, Lavandula angustifolia, not native to Scandinavia, but traded, brought home from distant voyages, and cherished like gold. Lavender was prized not just for its smell, but for its power. Even a few drops of oil, a few crushed petals, could relax the mind and slow the breath. Archaeological finds from trading centers confirm its presence, rare, precious, and profoundly sleep-inducing. But here's the key: the herbs alone weren't the whole medicine. The Vikings understood, perhaps better than we do, that how something is given is just as important as what is given. And so they wrap these herbs in ritual, intention, meaning. Picture this: a child unable to sleep. Astrid lights a small bundle of dried hops. The room fills with a warm, earthy scent. She brews valerian tea, humming an old lullaby passed down through generations. As the child drinks, she tells a story, not just to entertain, but to settle the mind. Sleep doesn't rush in like a drug. It arrives slowly, invited, welcomed, and given a place to stay. These were the Viking sleep rituals. Not loud, not flashy, but intimate, consistent, rooted in tradition and trust. And science now shows us this matters. Studies confirm that rituals before sleep reduce anxiety, signal the brain to prepare for rest, and improve overall sleep quality. The combination of herbs plus ritual is more powerful than either alone. What Astrid practiced wasn't magic, it was precision, without pressure. The herbs varied with the seasons. In summer, when light lingered and sleep came harder, stronger sedatives like valerian or hops were used. In winter, when rest was plentiful, lighter herbs like chamomile or linden were enough. And always, the herbs were harvested at their peak, dried carefully, stored with intention, because what grew from the earth was sacred. Today, we search for quick fixes. We take pills to knock us out without addressing the cause. But the Vikings didn't force sleep. They created the conditions for it to arrive naturally. Their approach was holistic. Sleep wasn't separated from their environment, their food, their bodies, or their beliefs. It was all one system, and the herbs were simply part of that harmony. So what can we learn from Astrid and her kin? That sleep isn't a battle. It's a conversation with the body, and herbs, when used with care, with rhythm, and with reverence, are one of the oldest languages we have. Tonight, before you reach for the screen, try reaching for the quiet. A warm cup of tea, a scent that reminds you of earth, a story, a breath, a moment of stillness. That's what the Vikings gave their children, and it might be exactly what we need to give ourselves. These days, we spend most of our hours seated, bent over screens, eyes tired, but bodies still restless. And then night falls, and we wonder why sleep won't come. But in the world of the Vikings, things were different. There was no gym, no fitness trackers, no structured workouts at 7 p.m. There was only life, and life demanded movement. Every morning, the Norse rose with the sun or before it. They didn't ease into the day with caffeine and emails. They walked, they hauled, they built. Every task, every breath was stitched with exertion. They carried firewood, pushed longships into icy waters, ground grain by hand, wove wool until the hands ached, and then kept going. Their days were a rhythm of strain and release, physical, natural, and deeply aligned with the needs of the body. Let's follow Gunnar, a shipbuilder from coastal Norway. He begins his day before sunrise, checking timber that's been curing for months. With his sons and workers, he lifts, carves, and shapes planks as thick as his arm, wood that will soon sail the sea. By mid-afternoon, his body hums with fatigue, the good kind, not mental exhaustion, not screen-induced overstimulation, but earned, full-body weariness, the kind of tired that wants to sleep, that asks for rest. And this is where the Viking world holds another quiet secret, not in herbs, not in firelight, but in the wisdom of motion. Modern science confirms it now, what they practiced instinctively. Physical activity is one of the strongest predictors of deep, high-quality sleep, especially when it's consistent, especially when it's real. Resistance training, lifting, carrying, building, increases the body's need for slow-wave sleep, the deepest phase of rest. This is when tissue rebuilds, muscles repair, the body heals. Aerobic activity, walking, rowing, working the fields, improves sleep efficiency. You fall asleep faster, stay asleep longer, dream deeper, and perhaps most importantly, movement resets the circadian clock. It tells the body the day is done, and now you may rest. The Vikings didn't exercise, they existed in motion, and this, more than any supplement or sleep app, created the perfect foundation for sleep. But it wasn't just the volume of physical activity, it was the timing. Their labor took place during the daylight hours when the sun was high. By evening, the body naturally began to downshift. This mirrors what modern sleep experts now recommend: intense activity in the morning or afternoon, lighter, slower routines in the evening, and time to wind down both physically and mentally as darkness arrives. In the Viking world, evening meant storytelling, mending, Soft crafts, eating together, the tools were put away, the voices softened, and the body, after a full day of labor, was already halfway to sleep. Now think of our world. We sit all day, barely move, then try to burn it off with a high-intensity workout at 8 p.m. Our bodies are confused. Tired minds, twitching limbs, no clear signal that the day is done. No wonder we struggle to fall asleep. We've broken the cycle. The Vikings lived by that cycle. Summer, longer days, more work, more movement. Winter, shorter light, slower pace, a natural deload. They worked with the seasons, not against them. Their rest matched the light, their labor matched the land, and their sleep matched their lives. Even their play was physical. Wrestling, stone lifting, swimming in cold rivers. It wasn't for vanity, it was for connection, for strength, for survival, and as a side effect, for sleep. Today, scientists speak of the exercise sleep feedback loop. The more consistent the movement, the deeper the sleep. And the deeper the sleep, the better the recovery for the next day of movement. The Vikings lived that loop, day by day, season by season, without ever needing to name it. And here's something else to remember. It wasn't just physical, their work was communal, done with others. Together, they built houses, raised sails, shared burdens. And research now shows social movement, physical activity done with others, improves not only mood and motivation, but also sleep depth and duration. Why? Because it grounds us in the body, in the tribe, in the now. So, what does this mean for us? It means that the body is not the enemy of sleep, it's the gateway. It means that sleep doesn't just come from silence, it comes from spent muscles, a beating heart, a day lived fully. And if we want to rest like the Vikings, we may need to move like them first. Not in battle, not in brutality, but in rhythm, in purpose, in honest, embodied presence. Chopping wood, walking further, lifting what needs to be lifted. Letting the body tell the brain, I have done enough for today. Because when the body remembers effort, it also remembers how to let go. The Vikings didn't earn their sleep by pushing harder. They earned it by living aligned with the land, with the light, and with their own strength. And as night fell, their bodies weren't restless, they were ready. Not because they had mastered sleep, but because they had returned to what sleep was meant to follow, a life fully lived. In our time, sleep has become something we chase, something we try to control. We measure it, analyze it, worry about it. And in doing so, we forget how to actually experience it. But the Vikings, they didn't optimize sleep. They simply lived in a way that made sleep inevitable. And much of that came not from herbs or habits, but from mindset. Today, we lie awake because of our thoughts, fear, stress, overthinking. We worry about tomorrow, we replay yesterday, and sleep, once natural, becomes elusive. The Vikings, though, carried a different psychology into the night, one shaped by their worldview and their relationship with mortality, meaning, and rest. To the Norse, life and death were not enemies. They were partners in a cycle, ever turning, ever returning. Odin himself gave up an eye for wisdom. Warriors faced death not with terror, but with a sense of purpose. To die well was to live well. And in this belief, fear had no place in the dark. The night was not something to be conquered. It was something to be entered, like a hall, like a ritual, like a return. Modern sleep science tells us that psychological safety is essential for sleep. The brain must feel secure, but safety isn't just physical, it's mental, emotional, existential. The Vikings weren't burdened by the same type of chronic mental loops we are today. They didn't lie in bed fearing inboxes or performance reviews. They feared storms, blight, betrayal. But they met these things during daylight. They worked, spoke, and acted into their fears, not away from them. So by the time darkness came, they had done their part. The rest was left to the gods. This is something we can learn because it wasn't passivity, it was surrender, grounded in action. To the Viking mind, sleep was not a gap in productivity. It was part of the cycle of strength. As essential as forging a blade or setting a sail, even warriors needed restoration. Sleep wasn't weakness, it was integration, a way to return to balance after chaos. Consider the mindset of a Norse raider returning home. After weeks at sea, battling storms and enemies, he steps into the longhouse. The fire is lit. The air smells of smoke and meat. His axe is set aside. His boots come off. And as he lies down, he does not doubt that he has earned this sleep. He has faced the world, faced himself. There is nothing more to chase, only to rest. Compare that to today. We climb into bed, still half running. chasing answers, scrolling feeds, grasping at calm. But the Vikings didn't chase calm. They cultivated it through routine, through movement, through community, and most importantly, through belief. Their belief systems offered closure. They believed in the Norns, the weavers of fate, in Yggdrasil, the world tree that held all realms, in cycles of rebirth, of honor, of sacrifice. And when you believe that your story fits into something greater, you stop trying to control every page, you let go. And in that letting go, sleep finds you. We now call this existential security, a sense that you are part of something larger, something timeless. The Vikings lived this without labels. For them, the firelight was sacred, the darkness was respected, the breath, the body, the moment, all part of a larger rhythm. Even their storytelling played a role. Sagas were told at night, not just to entertain, but to frame the day, to remind the tribe who they were. Children fell asleep to stories of Thor and Freya, of heroes, gods, tricksters, and fate. These stories weren't distractions, they were psychological anchors. And research today shows that narrative framing helps the brain wind down. It gives shape to chaos. It gives us a way to say, the story can pause here, I'll continue it tomorrow. The Viking mindset was not passive, it was ritualized. When they stopped working, they stopped. They shifted into a different gear, one of presence, of release, of trust in the world beyond control. And in that shift, sleep had room to enter. No resistance, no guilt, just permission to rest. So, what would it look like for us to reclaim this? Not by becoming Vikings, but by remembering what they remembered. That rest is not earned by exhaustion, it's invited through alignment. That the mind must believe deeply that the world will hold while we sleep. That we are not machines to be shut down, but stories needing silence to unfold. The Vikings didn't call it mindfulness, but they practiced it in the rhythm of the axe, the quiet of the fire, the song before sleep. And maybe that's what we need most. Not more stimulation, but more surrender. Not just a darker room, but a quieter mind, because sleep isn't the absence of thought, it's the presence of peace. And the Vikings, those storm-born warriors, carried that peace with them into the night. They didn't run from the dark, they walked into it with strength, with story, and with trust. In the end, the Vikings weren't trying to sleep better. They weren't chasing rest. They were simply living in a way that made deep sleep the natural conclusion of each day. And maybe that's the difference. Today, we treat sleep as a puzzle, a performance, something to fix, something to optimize. But the Viking world teaches us something quieter, something older. Sleep isn't something you force. It's something you prepare for, something you allow. So what can we learn, truly, from these ancient northern lives? What can a 1,000-year-old longhouse, a pot of herbal tea, a day spent hauling wood teach us about this moment in this world? The answers are simple, but not easy, because they require us to do something that feels radical in our time: slow down. 1. Sleep begins long before your head hits the pillow. For the Vikings, there was no sharp line between day and night, no last-minute scramble to power down. The rhythm of the day naturally softened. As the sun fell, so did the intensity of their tasks. By evening, their minds and bodies were already shifting from doing to being. Today's takeaway: start preparing for sleep 2, even 3 hours before bed. Dim the lights. Step away from stimulation. Let your system begin to descend, not collapse. Number 2, match your movement to your rest. The Vikings didn't exercise. They moved with purpose. Their physical exertion wasn't a checkbox. It was life. And because their days were full, their nights could be empty, not of thought, but of tension. Your move? Reclaim daily motion, not punishment, rhythm, walk, stretch, lift. Not to burn calories, but to signal to your body the day was real, and now it can end. 3, eat like sleep depends on it, because it does. Viking meals were whole, heavy with protein and fat, light on sugar, and eaten early. There were no midnight snacks, no glowing fridges in the dark. Their food supported rest, it didn't interrupt it. Modern application: finish eating at least 2 to 3 hours before bed. Prioritize real food, avoid sugar. Let your body digest the day before it dreams. 4, honor the dark. The Viking world respected darkness. They didn't fight it, they built homes to shelter it. They dimmed their spaces with firelight, amber, low, gentle. Today, we drown our nights in LED and screen glare and wonder why we feel so wide awake. Your next step? Turn down the lights, use red spectrum bulbs, light a candle. Let your nervous system remember what nighttime feels like. 5. Sleep in the presence of trust. Viking sleep wasn't solitary, it was communal, safe, surrounded by kin, warmth, and breath. And in that presence, the nervous system relaxed. The brain said, I'm not alone. I can let go. You may not live in a longhouse, but you can build safety into your own sleep space. A calming voice, a scent, a story. A ritual that reminds your brain, you are held, you are safe, you can rest now. 6. Let go of the war with your thoughts. The Vikings didn't try to silence their minds. They gave them story, meaning, closure. When night came, they handed off the day to the gods, to the Norns, to something beyond control. They didn't fear the dark because they didn't fear uncertainty. And that, perhaps, is the deepest sleep lesson of all. You don't need to solve everything before sleep. You just need to stop gripping so tightly. Create your own moment of letting go, a phrase, a prayer, a sentence to yourself. The day is done. I've done my part. Now I rest. These aren't hacks. They're not tips to squeeze more productivity out of your 8 hours. They're a return to something more human, more ancient, more whole. Because the truth is, your body hasn't forgotten. Your biology still knows how to sleep. It's the noise around you and inside you that gets in the way. What the Vikings teach us is not how to sleep harder, but how to remove the friction between wakefulness and rest. And once that friction is gone, sleep arrives like a tide. Not forced, not chased, just allowed. So tonight, try it. Even just one thing. Dim the lights, take a slow walk, make a small cup of tea, sit in silence for 5 minutes. And remember, the goal isn't to win at sleep, it's to return to rhythm, to let your body do what it's always known how to do. Just like the Vikings did 1,000 years ago. Not with gadgets, not with guilt, but with honor, with rhythm, and with trust. So now you know. The Vikings didn't just carve ships or conquer lands, they carved space for breath, for rhythm, for stillness. They made rest a ritual, not a reward, not an afterthought, a part of life, as necessary as fire, as sacred as story. And maybe the most radical thing you can do today is to follow their lead, not by sleeping in a longhouse, not by fighting with swords, but by remembering what they never forgot, that we are creatures of cycle, of light and dark, of effort and release, of action and surrender. The modern world will keep telling you to do more, to chase harder, to fix what's broken. But the Viking world whispers something different. Live deeply, let go fully, and trust that rest will find you. If this message struck something deep, then this isn't just a video, it's an invitation. Subscribe, not for sleep hacks, but for ancient wisdom made real again. Comment below, tonight I will return to rest by bye. Share this with someone who's tired of chasing sleep and ready to reclaim it. Because better rest doesn't begin with better sleep. It begins with a better rhythm. And if you're still here, still listening, maybe you're already on your way back.